Greetings, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I can't hear anything, unfortunately, but I'm wishing you a lovely evening with us this evening. Sorry, Toyin, sorry. There's no sound coming through. Amos just said.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you can hear the sound of my mic, even though I seem to have lost video.
Something's gone wrong.
So I'm just doing a test. Hopefully I'll get Oleander to sing to you or something while we're figuring out things on this side. So I think the mic is back up and running. If you can give us a check to see if you can hear us on that. But I think we're back. So let's give this a check. And okay. You can hear me now. That's great. So you can hear both of us. Hopefully we have a bit of luck. I'm not sure what's going on over there. You can hear us okay? Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2. Great. Thank you. What I'll do, I'll take it back to the beginning of this story. And
I can hear you now, Toyin.
Great. Okay. Excellent. So what I'll do, I'll take it back to the beginning of this story, and let's see if I can get myself on the screen. Seem to be having gremlins today. Okay, I seem to be there. And that's strange. It's prioritizing Sister Oleander there. I think that's bizarre. Let me do this for a second and then do that and do that. And hopefully everything's okay. Apologies to that one. We do have gremlins, as you know, with this program every now and then. It wouldn't be a Legally project without those gremlins. But hopefully you can give us a check that you can hear us okay. I think I'm going to keep going just all the other says that she can hear us. If you can have a quick check on the chats, that would be brilliant. But this is the story of our brother Ian Taylor. And I say it's a strange one, really, because we don't normally, we don't often do ones with ancestors who have been passed for such a long time. I mean, we have in the past, but not always. But when I came across this story a few days ago, it was, I hadn't heard of this brother's name. And his name was Ian Taylor. He's 54 years of age, and he joined the ancestors on the 29th of June in 2019. And the reason why it came up was because it was the conclusion of an inquest into his death, which occurred in Brixton after interaction with the police. Now, what happened is that the police were arresting him. I don't know all the information of why they was arresting him, but what I do know was that when they were engaged in this activity, he did not have his inhaler. He didn't have any water or medical assistance. And this led to his death. And I say that led to his death because the jury found that his passing was caused by acute asthma. It was caused by stress. It was caused by dehydration and underlying heart or health conditions. But most importantly, because of the poor police assessment of the risks to his health. Because you see, what happened while they were arresting him, while they were detaining him, where they were on top of him, was that they were being very facetious. Our brother Ian was asking for water, for example. It was the hottest day of June in 2019. It was the scorching temperature, and they were having bottles of waters amongst themselves. And when he asked for some water, the officer says, "No, this is for us. It's for me, my colleagues. You can't have some water." There was a situation where he could not breathe. The heat, the dehydration was causing him to have respiratory problems. He said, I can't breathe. He didn't have his inhaler. He wanted medical assistance. And they were like, what do you mean you can't breathe? You're breathing now, aren't you? So how do you mean you can't breathe? And so it was an outrageous scenario. It was a disgusting situation. The coroner's actually going to report one of the police officers to the IOPC because of the poor misconduct. But none of this brings back our brother Ian Taylor, who joined the ancestors at the age of 54. So we remember him. And It's quite scary. It's just like the Child Q situation. This happened 3 years ago, and I'm starting to worry about what else happened in those 2 years. What other incidents happened, which we're only going to find out about now, and which the police have kept quiet for over those last 48 months. I'm going to keep going on because I know time is running short. You are watching myself, Toyin Agbetu. I'm here with Sister Oleander. This is the Pan-African Community News Network, 22nd of May, 2022. So the next story, the next section is community news. And the next story that we're going to cover is one that's even more horrific. And that's of, hold on, it changed by itself. That's a bit strange. Hold on one second. Let me do that. And that's better. And the next story is that of the Buffalo massacre. Now, the Buffalo massacre is, how do you describe it? A young 18-year-old white supremacist decided to scope out a shop in Buffalo, New York, which was frequented majority by African people. He went there a couple of days before, found out who was going to be there, what the layout was, and then he went there a few days later with assault rifle, full body armor, and he just went around shooting African people indiscriminately. The security guard had, they've got this thing in America now, where the gun lobby says that the only thing that could stop a person with a gun is another person with a gun. So the security guard, who was an African male, he shot at this white supremacist. Unfortunately, because the body armor was quite robust, it had no effect, and so he was murdered by this teen. It's just a ridiculous situation because this is a child, right? He's 18 years of age. He's spouting the Great Replacement theory. This is this idea that that's running across Europe, and of course in America we have people like Trump and people like Le Pen, all promoting this idea that migrants are coming and taking over and replacing Europeans one by one in their lands, and there'll be none of them left. And so Europeans feel they have to do something, they have to engage to and create war if they have to by themselves to solve this problem. And so this man, this child, this teen, he decided to take it upon himself to kill 10 people aged between 32 and 86. He shot 13. The youngest was 20, but 3 people recovered. The majority of them, 10 of them, were African people. And he's just created a feeling of terror. The police miraculously managed to capture him alive, which is one of those strange things, because of course whenever it's Africans, even if they're armed only with a packet of Skittles, they seem to find a way to murder them. Or if they're passing counterfeit $10 bills, they find a way to murder them. But this time they captured this teen alive. The media is going on about how he, or some elements of the media is going on about how he has mental health issues. And so that's what's led him to do this. COVID made him mentally unstable. We have no block of that. He was a white supremacist. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wrote a manifesto. He streamed it live. And his rifle had the N-word on the barrel written on it. He knew exactly what he was doing, who he was going out there to kill, and what it was for. This was not no random snapping mental health disorder. And I think it's a disservice to do that. I don't want to comment on this because it just, well, you can feel it. I'm just paralyzed with the anger, and there is a level of fear. There is this thing about not being able to be safe even going shopping if you're an African in America. We remember what happened in Charlesville. So you can't even go to a church in America if you're an African person without the fear of being murdered. But I will name those who lost their lives. It was Roberta Drury, 32, Marcus D. Morrison, 52, Andre McNeil, 53, Aaron Salter, 55. Geraldine Talley, 62. Celestine Channy, 65. Haywood Patterson, 65 or 67. Catherine Macy, 72. Pearl Young, 77. And Ruth Whitfield, 86. And you can see the images of the 10 people that he murdered. They were doing nothing wrong. And may the ancestors help them find peace in the other realm, and may we find and secure justice in this one. I'm going to go to the next story. It's another harrowing one. Fortunately, no one lost their life, but this one is unfortunately far too common tale of the pain that our children are suffering in the British education system. And this is a story of Raheem Bailey. He's an 11-year-old boy who lost his finger while fleeing from bullies at school in Albert Lee Learning Community in Wales. It's an incredible story, which I still find incredible that this is taking place. It just sounds ridiculous. But here it is. He faced racial and physical abuse in his school and bullying about his height ever since starting his secondary school in September 2021. And on this particular day, he was being bullied. He ran. He tried to flee them. He climbed over a fence. His finger got caught on the fence. It snapped. It went backwards. They had to get him to hospital. There was a mix-up with how he's going to get to hospital. They eventually did it. I think it was a 5-hour journey. They tried to save his finger, but they couldn't, and he lost it. The school hasn't bothered to contact the mother since to see how our son is doing. When we hear about things like safeguarding, they had complained about the bullying, nothing was done. When we hear about safeguarding in these spaces, it's like a joke. It's like people are treating it when it comes to our children as something that's just an afterthought. Now, the mother has actually put up a GoFundMe a campaign online, and she's trying to raise money for a prosthetic finger for one that's personalized, and any additional funds to help with the cost to help him on his road to recovery. So I don't have the link here, but you can actually find it online. She has raised a target for the prosthetic finger, but I still recommend that people contribute if they can, just to help him, because his life is going to be forever altered. And that's our son, Raheem Bailey. The next story is a bit closer to where we're based in London. And this one takes place in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea at Holland Park School. And what we now know is that there's been an investigation by trustees. There was a dysfunctional governing body. They were all replaced, and a new team came in and they pushed forward this investigation. And what they found is a history in this school of pupil humiliation, of racism, and has gone as far as misleading Ofsted. It was outrageous. The report is online, or not the whole report. A summary of the report is online. I think it's around 4 or 5 pages, so you can see what happened. I think it's a 55-page report. They've kept some of the details private to preserve the anonymity. I think I got it right, of the students involved. But there were complaints about how Ofsted were misled about sex abuse victims who the school failed to support, how students were left publicly humiliated. The investigator who actually looked into the school said there was a culture of fear, of favoritism and inequality. And the academy, which is known as Socialist Eton, just kind of like started to hide people. So when Ofsted were coming in to do their investigations, they were making sure that they weren't present on site, that they stayed at home. So the school is making a refer to a teaching regulation authority, but this is something we need to keep our eye on. Another story. This is a familiar tale when it comes to policing of stop and search. This time, not of the Metropolitan Police, but of the City of London Police. This is a social worker, Edwin Afriye, and he suffered head injuries after being tasered by the City of London Police. Now, what happened? He was driving 3 friends home from a party. He has a Mercedes coupe. They were just being really facetious to police. You wanted to know kind of like, why are you stopping us? The general questions that we tend to ask. They didn't like it. He had his arms folded. He was really upset about, kind of like, why are you stopping me for? I'm one of those guys who goes around trying to help the community to engage with the police to make things better. They were having none of it, the officers, and they tasered him in his chest. He fell backwards and hit his head on a stone window ledge, which is how he got his injury. Now, there's been an investigation, a preliminary one, and in the initial reports, the police are saying that he reached for something as if he had a weapon. He was acting aggressive. He adopted this fighting stance. He was aggressively resisting, all these kind of things. But Edwin just says that they treated him like a wild animal. That's how he saw it. So, this is, again, remember all these stories, apart from the first one, which was of our brother Ian, took place within the last couple of weeks. So as much as you're hearing, and you're going to continue to hear about the police doing its best to address these issues, what's going on, the abuse that's going on, that many of our people are facing, is still live. It's still there. It's still present. Even when we go outside the domain of the public streets and we start thinking about sports, we have the story of the Essex Cricket Club being fined after pleading guilty of racism in 2017. And again, like I said, these are legacy cases. I'm bringing this up because, of course, it's the reports has been arisen in the last 14 days, the last 2 weeks. But in this particular instance, we have this bizarre scenario where you have the former chairman, John Farragher, who the man who's pictured in the image, who denies using the racist N-word comments, which I think it was something about the N-word in the woodpile kind of thing during the meeting, but people say that he did. And part of the problem with this particular case is that even though people made complaints, despite how serious people felt offended that he was so comfortable making these kind of racist, using these racist tropes, there was this huge delay before the cricket club even started to investigate it. They didn't even act on it. In fact, there's still no procedures in place at the cricket club to act on it. So it took ages. It took the murder of George Floyd. It took the Black Lives Matter movement. It took all these kind of pressures for there to be an investigation. And then they have finally been fined £50,000. The club itself pleaded guilty, even though he didn't. And I think £15,000 has been kind of like withdrawn. So they said, you don't have to pay £35,000, £15,000 you can pay later on. And the cricket club is saying they're going to do their best to make sure these kind of things don't happen again. So even in sports, we see, and we know this, and we remember the history of football. We know all this kind of stuff happens. So I'm not going to elaborate on this. We spoke about our brother Edwin and how he'd been tasered by the City of London Police, and that was those are kind of like full official police officers. But what we now know is that the Home Office, Priti Patel, is actually authorized and is passing legislation now, or passing law, to make it okay for volunteer police officers to be armed with taser stun guns. And so you have to understand, right now, only, I say full officers can actually carry these weapons. And some of them recognize that, this is not going to help things and they don't want to. It's just going to cause more problems. But the government doesn't really care. And so now it's stretching the remit of who can carry them to volunteer police officers. So that's just something to be aware of. There's actually more things that have changed, more legislation that stop and search powers have been extended so they can last for 24 hours. Section 60s, which used to last for, I think it was 36 hours, can now last, can now last for 48 hours. So all the duration of all the stop and search legislation has been increased, and the officer who can authorize a section 60 has now been reduced. So it used to be a higher ranking officer. That's actually been made now, so even a lower ranking officer can authorize a section 60 in the area, and it can now, of course, run longer. So there's many problems taking place right now, and many issues taking place in the UK under this particular government, where police powers, abusive police powers, have actually been strengthened. Whether the police want it or not, there's always going to be those racist officers who are going to abuse these situations. You're here with me, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu on Pan-African Community News Network, just going through the stories over the last couple of weeks in the studio with Sister Oleander. Please remember, if you can catch us on Facebook or YouTube, you can do the chatty thing. She's monitoring that. If you have any questions, she'll answer and post it, and we can discuss them. And we're just going through, like I said, the news with a Pan-African twist on them. So, unfortunately, we're still on the topic of policing. This is another inquiry that's taken place. And this is one of Sheku Bayu, who was now being accused of having been deranged with superhuman power during an inquiry into his death in May 2015. Now, Sekou was 31 years of age. I think he was having a mental health crisis. The police were called for help. This is when they restrained him, these officers in Kirkcaldy, Scotland. And, he had a knife in his hand, I think some people are saying, so people who are justifying the abuse of police powers are saying that this is the reason why it was okay to kill him. But the reality of the situation is that it wasn't. He was held down. They used CS spray on him while he was being restrained. And the family have continuously complained that he would still be alive if the police had actually treated him like a human being and not acted in a racist manner. They believe that it was actually positional asphyxia, which is where police officers put so much pressure on our respiratory system that we just can't breathe and then we die. So again, this is another situation of police abuse, essentially, of deaths of African people by the overzealous use of force by police officers. The inquiry hasn't been concluded. It hasn't concluded yet, so I shouldn't draw conclusions. But I am familiar with one of the family members, and there was something I saw on Twitter today by the barrister, Queen's Counsel Matthew Ryder, which was a really important point of law he was outlining to us all. And it's the way that the legal system works when it comes to the use of force, the legal use of force in these kind of cases against African people. And he was arguing that there's two tests that take place, one before the other. I'm doing this from memory, so excuse me if I don't get it 100% right. So the first test is whether the officer believed that he was there was a risk of danger, a threat to his life, how credible that threat to his life was. And that doesn't have to be reasonable. So the way the law is phrased is that if an officer says that he believed that there was a credible threat to his life, he believed that the person posed a superhuman threat to his life, which fits in with the racist tropes about African people having this kind of beast-like strength, then that's the first criteria passed. The second criteria, and that's the subjective criteria. The second criteria is the objective one. The objective one says, okay, so now that you have explained that you have this fear, whether it's irrational, of this risk of danger to your life or to the public, etc., did you use reasonable force to deal with that situation? And that's an objective measure. So you have to understand, and once those two things are passed, then police officers cleared. If they aren't passed, then police officers guilty of using excessive force. And the reason I want to say that is because it's the first one that's the problem. You see, because if an officer then says, I saw this person, this 2-year-old on the street, and they flung their baby rattle with such vigor, I was fearful of my life that if that rattle hit me on my forehead, I would die. then that irrational fear that the officer said to believe, because it's a belief that the officer believed that there was this fear, then leads to the second thing, is how much force did the officer use to neutralize? Was it proportionate to the baby? And so therefore, if the officer said he was fearful of his life, he can say he pulled out a taser, set it to maximum setting, and then tasered the baby. Now, of course, this is a ridiculous scenario I'm giving you, but I'm trying to give you an example that help you to understand how ludicrous those two conditions are when you place them like this. One is subjective, one's objective. So this is what's happened. This is why police officers collude after they've killed someone, because once they can collude and say that they've had a reasonable belief that the person posed a threat to life, it's like with Rashard and Charles. There was no threat to the officer's life, but once they can, so they argue that he was a threat to his own life, that he ingested drugs, and so the reason they put their hands in his mouth and stopped him breathing was to save his life. So it's just, I know it's a bit nerdy, but it was a really interesting piece of information that our brother Matthew shared, and I just wanted to share that with you, just so you kind of understand how the legal system works in these kind of cases. So when a police officer claims, and these are the words, that Sheku was deranged with superhuman power, when those are his actual words, that is the first line level, saying that I had a belief. Doesn't matter if it's irrational, doesn't matter if it was a subjective belief that he was a Kryptonian, that he had this strength, and therefore I was justified to spray him in his face, even though he was detained, to put much weight on him, stop it from breathing, and that was a reasonable force in relation to the superhuman power that Sheku had. That's how the law works in this country. I'm going to move on. I probably spent a bit too much time on that one, but
sorry, Toyin. I just wanted to say it's just.
So, where does that leave us when it comes to the police as an institution and how they feel about change? Well, it's a really interesting one, because we know that the Metropolitan Police is the biggest police force in the whole of the UK. But outside the police, you have different police forces, and they come together under this chief of, I've forgotten what they're called. You think I'd know by now. Basically, they come together. All the chief of police is under one federation, and they work with the Metropolitan Police. And so, but they are different from the Metropolitan Police, and so they are actually working on this action plan to tackle racism. It's something I actually applied for. I wanted to kind of like be involved in making sure the plan was robust. And I got through to the shortlisted to the final 3 candidates, I think it was, but they decided not to go for me to run that program. I wonder why. Actually, I know why. I told them that they should get rid of Cressida Dick. It's quite funny now, isn't it? Because I said that, and that was one of the things that led to them actually not picking me, and now she's gone. But that's another point. So they're doing this action plan, and they're working now with our sister Abimbola Johnson, and she's now the chair. She got the post in the end of the Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Board, ISOB, that's what it's called. And they've just actually announced a whole lot of new board members. And I think Katrina Fench is one of them who's doing some really great work. So they still have some good people there who can scrutinize them. But what was interesting is that there's a 50-page plan about to be produced by this National Police Chiefs Council. That's it, NPCC, not the National Child. I always remember confusing with the NSPCC, but it's take out the S, National Police Chiefs Council, and they're working with a College of Policing. And they're in this bizarre scenario now where they're saying that they're about to apologize for the racism and discrimination and bias that's within their institutions. They happily admit that, but they won't admit to being institutionally racist. And to make this even more weird is that they're saying that what they will do is commit to being institutionally anti-racist. And so I know that there's some really good people in this ISOB team, and they're really working to get change. But these are what we call reforms. They're not, radical wholesale changes that are going to take place. And if the police are unwilling to name the problem, they think that calling themselves institutionally racist will be a hindrance. I think actually it's the complete opposite. It will enlighten, it will put a zeal in everyone to get the job done, to get rid of that title. if they jump from institutionally racist to call themselves institutionally anti-racist, then what they're doing is creating this myth that contradicts their statements, their apologies for having racism and discrimination within their institutions. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, it's a complicated thing. This is policing in the UK. That's what's taking place. I'll probably spend too much time on that already. On a related note, Hackney Council recently had this 4-day anti-racism praxis conference, and again, it promoted its ideas of being institutionally anti-racist. Now, I'm not for one moment saying that Hackney Council is like the police. I'm not, there were times when it was clearly institutionally racist. Now, I don't work in the council. I know there's going to be racism within it. I know some of the practices they do, they protect people who are racist, whether they like to admit it or not. They don't go far enough, but there are real, genuine people in there who are pushing for change. So this 4-day event, which took place, like I said, over the last 2 weeks, was well attended, even though the hundreds of people that you see in the photos are actually people who actually work for the council. So, I find it a bit strange they're using terms like anti-racist praxis. I don't think they quite understand what praxis means. They brought in, I think it was David Weaver to give a keynote discussion, and they had some good workshops I've heard from people who were present. I wasn't invited, people like myself who actually engage in praxis. It's almost the way the council works, in the way that national institutions work, where they don't actually recognize the talent or the skill sets and experience of the people in the area that they live in, because they know that they can actually point to the blind sides and expose any hypocrisy. So they normally fly in people from America or from abroad who do the work. Well, at least this time they didn't go out of the UK, and they brought in someone who's respected in the field with David Weaver. But it did make me, I didn't go. I didn't try to go. If they didn't want me there, they didn't want people like me there, there's no point us being there. But I think we've got to be careful. And I just wanted to flag up this new institutionally anti-racist term. We're going to hear a lot about that, I suspect. And it becomes branding when it's used by institutions that haven't finished the job yet. And for all of the great work that Hackney Council is doing, and it is doing some great work, the Rename, Reclaim project and research that I'm engaged in, and many other projects are doing some really good stuff. But we had to be careful there. And this is something you're going to see other councils around the UK doing if we're not got our eye on the ball. Okay. We spoke about problems in cricket. So let's go to football. This is an interesting one. This is a case of a family. So a footballer's family, footballers from Brentford, being subjected to racist abuse while playing Everton. And the players have got so upset. I think Rico Henry and Ivan Toney, they were so upset with the abuse that their families were subjected to. They just made it clear, look, we've asked the police to investigate this. And I think, what was the comments? I never usually speak out on things that don't physically harm me or my family, but to see my mum upset after being racially abused by a few Everton fans brought fire to my stomach. And so, Henry, this is Rico Henry, he's saying, I'm going to take this all away. It's one thing for you to abuse us, me or whatever with words, but you start attacking my family, and I will do anything for them and whatever it takes to get the small minority punished. It's not acceptable and must be investigated immediately. And so the police are investigating it. And this is a good story on one side. There is another side of it that I'm a little bit funny about. And it is this thing that I don't usually speak out on things that don't physically harm me or my family. That is the default position for many footballers, many personalities in sports and the media for a long time. It's only over the last couple of years that has changed. And so, I didn't quite like that comment, but at least it's just being honest. That's the position that he holds. But at least, hey, there's some fire in the belly right now. So we'll see what happens with that one.
Hold on 1 second, Toyin.
This is
Toyin,
an interesting one. It's actually a good one. Hold on, let me come back to that. This one,
sorry, can you hear me?
that's far more better. I think the quality was a bit duff for some reason. That's been fixed. This is a
Toyin,
story from the Foreign Press Association in Africa, and they're condemning the Afrophobic coverage of the monkeypox outbreaks in the UK and US. And I don't know if you've been hearing this story. There's been this outbreak in of monkeypox across the world. I say across the world, it'll be quite specific, across the UK and across Europe and the US. And what's happening is that the majority of the stories that have been covering have been using images of African people with monkeypox, but the outbreak isn't taking place in Africa. And so there's this sense of associating disease and plagues and kind of things with African bodies again. And so I think this is amazing. This is a really good piece of work that the Foreign Press Association of Africa did. And some media organizations are starting to respond. They're starting to make sure they're using pictures because they have images, right, of Europeans who have monkeypox. I've picked a more palatable image. There are some far worse images of monkeypox on Europeans. And you've got to remember that monkeypox isn't new in the UK. There's been 7 cases between 2018 and 2021. And right now, there's around 100 suspected cases across Europe and America. I think one in Australia, and the UK has at least 20. Now, some people will say that, but isn't this more prevalent in Nigeria? That's where it comes from and stuff like that. Well, in the past, what happened was that all the cases of monkeypox used to be of people who had traveled from Nigeria. But in these cases, there's no travel involved. So there is absolutely no explanation, no reason other than racism, really, to associate this outbreak of monkeypox with African people. I don't know if you know much about it. I've just learned about it obviously over the last week or so. It's not a fatal disease. I think 1% of people who contract it can lose their life. It's far much harder to transmit it. You have to be physically intimate in a sense, or very close. So sexual intercourse is one way of transmission. But other than that, it's very, very difficult to get it from someone. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. It doesn't mutate in the same way like COVID does as well. So, but it's strange that it's re-emerging, and I think the real danger is not on the people who are catching it, but on the people who are vulnerable to these kind of viral or these kind of diseases, and whether they catch it and places them at risk. So that's why it's important to be accurate with this and not to start engaging in racialization and stigmatization on a story. Even if just visually you're telling lies, we have to be quite clear. It's Europeans who are actually carrying and transmitting this disease at this particular moment in time. The next story.
Sorry, Toyin.
Oleander, did you want to?
I'm trying to say something. Can you hear me? I'm speaking, but you can't hear me. No,
I don't know if that's my side or. Are you, it's Oleander, did you say something?
I'm trying to. Yeah, I've been trying to speak for a while. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Oh yeah, there was some news stories further back. I was trying to comment on. Anyway, it's fine. So just to say, Ajani from Bristol is here. He just wanted to. I'm assuming it's he. Actually, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Ajani. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Did you say you wanted to comment on a couple of stories?
It's too far back. It's fine.
That's okay. Which story? What was the one that you was interested in?
Oh gosh, I can't remember which ones it was, but I remember that the one about the boy with the finger. I'm just gonna say my heart went out when I heard about that story. There was another one which I've forgotten, but the one about the brother having so-called superhuman powers, it made me just think that these police people, they're like, it's almost like a child just sort of expressing this story and just sort of elaborating on a story, which children can do, if they exaggerate something. This just ridiculous. I can't believe that they actually said that they feel that he had superhuman powers. I mean, what universe are they living in? Not this one.
unfortunately, it's a good strategy for them. It's served them very well, which is why I kind of wanted to outline some of the legal policy and kind of like why they do this and how it prevents them from being prosecuted and going to jail for it. So we need to change that. Those are the things that we need to, and it's difficult, but that's it. But no, thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
This particular story is really irritating. And this is a story, again, remember everything I'm talking about, apart, and I explained when the legacy issues over the last couple of years, but everything's taken place within the last couple of weeks. And there's been fury as this video has gone viral on social media about a European student at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa urinating on the books and laptop of an African student. And, you know, I mean, I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, that the student came out and, you know, their room, and they saw them and they just continued just urinating on their stuff. And what the hell, you know, what are you doing? And, you know, the student, the European student, the male, he says that this is what we do to black boys. That was his response. Now, the university has come out and says it strongly condemns this destructive, hurtful, and racist incident. And there's been protests all across, well, not all across Tanzania, but there's been protests at the university with students of all ethnic background taking part. There's been some great expressions of solidarity saying that, no, this is not on, but this is what's taking place in South Africa. I mean, you know, it's like apartheid, and you know, I don't even want to go there. You know, it's what's in your mind that you can do that and you feel no shame and you can explain this is what we do because you're an African. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's very interesting. Again, I mean, I know people confuse when I sometimes don't use racializing language, but South Africa is always a good example of why I don't use racializing language. So what happens is that the European who urinated and made this racist statement would define themselves as an African. They would call themselves a South African. They would call themselves a white South African. They would use all these other terms and stuff like that. And his exact words, that this is what we do to black boys, is a dispossession of the African identity from the student. And this is what racializing language does. I mean, when I talk about Buffalo, and I'm sorry for going off on an early tangent, but it's all related. One of the things that African Americans are saying right now is that we need to have legislation which makes, and this is the words they use, anti-black racism a crime. And you see, this is the problem when you are not specific with language. So when you say anti-black, and of course we understand what they mean. This is the whole point of Black Lives Matter. We understand what they mean, but this is why it doesn't work and why it never happens. Because what you need to make is Afrophobia, you know, criminal. That's what you need to criminalize, because that's very specific. That's about people with African heritage. If you say anti-black hate crime, then what happens is that blackness is an identity that people come in and leave. They come and go, come and go. Other people are gatekeepers for who is black or who's not. There's this ridiculous situation, and it goes for whiteness as well. So there's a ridiculous situation just a few days ago where that clown on LBC, Nick Ferrari, called himself a person of color because he can define who joins club whiteness and who doesn't belong with club whiteness. When you use racializing terms, you know, it's like anyone who's got position of power, of authority, who's defining, can actually say who comes and who goes. So the Irish were, at one point, they were racialized as black, and then that changed afterwards over a period of time, and they became racialized as white. So you have to say Afrophobia. You have to recognize the reason why we are quite specific with language. It's the same thing what happens with Europeans with Jewish heritage. So when they say anti-Semitic, it's very, very specific. There's no conflation with any other ethnic group with who they're talking about, and it makes the law far more effective. As long as we keep using racializing language and we enable racists like this one who urinated on on the students' property to get away with this, is that they can continue to dispossess us of our own heritage linguistically. You know, that's a lecture over. I'm going to move to the next slide, and this is again, all this stuff is interrelated. This is this this ridiculous story of the Home Office now issuing warnings to Africans that they have 14 days, African migrants, those who are fleeing conflict. So in this case, there's someone who, the Guardian name is Mohammed, that's a pseudonym, it's not his real name, fleeing from conflict in Sudan. He went on this arduous check to get all the way to the UK because he just kept on trying to move away from the conflict, or moving away from the trauma, to find somewhere that is safe. And now they're going to send him to Rwanda, all the way back to where, not even back to where he came from, but to another region. So he'd have to go near the place where he was traumatized and where the conflict he was fleeing from. It's an outrageous, inhumane policy that this government is engaging in, but they're moving full steam ahead. And the reason why, if you look at the images, I've put two, there's 3 slides. There's the one about the Sudanese refugees. There's the map that shows the journey and what the flight's going to do. But the final story is this bizarre tabloid story that went around in the media yesterday, and it's trending today, about a Ukrainian refugee who came to the UK. She moved in with a family, and the partner left his partner, who's the mother of his 2 children, to join and to run off with the Ukrainian refugee. And it seems like, Toyin, I know you don't do kind of like gossip. That's not your style. It's not, I don't do this kind of like tabloid tittle tattle, he said, she said nonsense. I'm not really interested in that stuff. But I think there's something about these 2 stories that we have to be honest about. This is about who are perceived as acceptable migrants, as acceptable, vulnerable people. So in one case, we have a man from Sudan fighting, fleeing from conflict, and he's going to be sent back. In another case, we have a Ukrainian fleeing from conflict. And I have no problem with admitting that. I think, they deserve to be protected just like everyone else. But in this case, they're welcome to come into the homes of British citizens. In fact, they're so welcome because they are still perceived as European, in the sense that they are European in ancestry, in heritage, that they can do the replacement of an English, I'm assuming his partner was English, an English or wife in the UK. There's something distasteful taking place here. There's something, extremely racist in this discourse that's taking place all at the same time, as some are being forced out and others are being allowed in. I'll leave that there. I haven't been keeping an eye on the time, have I? Oh, wow.
But also, Toyin, I just wanted to say that it's not just that they've been welcomed. It's not just that they've been welcomed into homes of people that live here, but they're actually offering people money to welcome them into their homes. And I'm just thinking of all the conflicts that we've had as a people around the world. They have never done that before, where they've said, come to England and people here will open up their homes to you and your family so that you can stay here, and we'll pay them £350 a month to do that. It just wouldn't happen.
It's not even just, you're right. It's not even just the UK. It's all the nations across the EU, but we're speaking about it from a British perspective. I mean, I'm thinking about the travesty of what happened with Hurricane Katrina, and people might, that might have not been a war, that might have been a national disaster. Even if I think about national disasters in Haiti, for example, there isn't this outpour of humanity for African people in these kind of situations. I've deliberately avoided talking about African situations. I'm talking about even those Africans in the diaspora don't face that level of compassion. So, you're right. And the fact that they're being paid is just testament to the level of racism that is still prevalent in this country when it comes to how people perceive migrations and migrants. And again, when we talk about adultification, and I talk about it in a sense of it affecting people of African heritage, because what happens is that the blueprint of a vulnerable child is seen as someone who's European. This is the same thing when we talk about migrants and people who are refugees. Is that the blueprint of someone who's vulnerable is never someone who's African or Asian or Arab or any other non-European background. It's always someone who's European, and that's when all the stops will come out to protect them. And if you're going to do that, then just be honest about it and don't start talking about human rights. Don't talk about solidarity. Don't talk about compassion. Just be honest and just say we're white supremacists. Just be honest, and we'll do anything to protect other people that we racialize as white. Well, anyway, thank you. Let me move on to the next story, and this is a far simpler one. This is a story of George Cole, who's 68, and he's going to be Leicester's first African mayor. I don't normally do so-called first black stories. I don't like them. The first time an African becomes or does something the same that a European has already done isn't something that I normally go on about. The first black phenomenon is quite tired and quite regressive as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't mean that I don't recognize, however, the achievements of people to be elevated and the work they do to get that position. But why I kind of decided to include it today, and you'll find to your surprise not once but twice, is in this particular instance our elder George Cole. He's been a councillor in Leicester since 2010. He was born in Kingston, came from Jamaica to England in 1964, and he plans to champion the work of the Sickle Cell Society as mayor. And I just thought, you know what, let's pick him up. It's like, this is someone who could have fallen foul of the Windrush scandal. There's no Windrush stories this week, even though I probably could have added another 5. And he's still doing good. He's still remembering who he is, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And the second so-called first black story, again, I don't like using the first black story, but again, it doesn't kind of like diminish the work that these people as individuals doing, is from Sandra Samuels. She's going to be Wolverhampton's first African mayor in nearly 200 years. And again, I normally wouldn't be going on about this, but in this particular case, the charities that Sandra Samuels has said that she's going to champion is the Wolverhampton African Caribbean Community Initiative, and I love the fact that she's specifically named that one. The Compton Care and the Wolverhampton Sickle Cell Care and Activity Centre. So, I like it when we have people who are kind of like in places of public prominence who are not afraid to say that actually these charities, these organizations, these centers need support, they need help. And so while I'm here, I'm going to help everyone, but I'm going to put a special focus on these communities, because right now they're struggling from racism. I mean, they're not saying that, I'm saying that, but their actions actually gives me hope. So again, this is another what we call a so-called first black. Now, the next one is not what I call first black. This one is about Diane Grayson, and she's the founder of the Ethnicity Pay Gap campaign. And she started the campaign I think 2018 is when she started mooting the idea. In 2019, it came around big time. And it was founded to raise awareness of the ethnicity pay gap and encourage government to make this disparity obsolete by making reporting mandatory. Now, unfortunately, the government has said they're not going to make it mandatory. They're reneged on it. Theresa May was the person who pushed forward on it when she was prime minister, but ever since Boris Alexander Piffle Johnson has been in power, him and his band of gangsters in number 10 Downing Street have rolled back on everything. Less said about the Creed report, the better. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize that it's good to have someone who's focused specifically on this particular issue, because we all have to find our niche. We all have to find the thing that we are passionate about, that we are focused on, that we are pushing forward to champion progress in the UK. So just picking up Diane Grayson. Now I'm going to go to the next part of the program, let me grab a glass of water. The next part of the program is what we call community reviews. I can honestly tell you, I haven't had a chance to go out to many events, if any. I missed an amazing one with Fiam. Oh, I've forgotten his surname. Fiam Lian, I think. He's a French footballer, former footballer. He's written a book on race and whiteness, and it was hosted by UCL. I was actually in the office when it was taking place, but I was just so tired with work. I knew it was on, and I just couldn't get out because I had to finish my work before going. And now everyone's told me it was such an amazing event, and I feel gutted that I didn't go. It's on YouTube, so you can catch it. But anyway, that's enough of my woes and toes about institutional life trying to turn you into autonomous. But community reviews. Let's go with the first story. This one is about a conference for the Black child. Now, I don't even know if you remember this groundbreaking conference. These take place annually, led by and founded by Diane Abbott MP. Now, it's coming back. It's coming back on 11th of June at Stoke Newington School and Sixth Form. This one's going to be focused on Child Q. It's about fighting back against institutional racism. It's a bit strange in that this one has actually been run in partnership with Stand Up to Racism, and the group. This is a Hackney-based group. They do some really good campaigns, but again, there's what? Let me just leave it at that. The prices are zero. So it's a free entry to around 55 quid. If you go on Eventbrite, type in Conference of the Black Child, it'll come up. You can come in for nothing. It is free entrance if you want to come in. The other amounts of payment that you can pay are really solidarity donations. So don't be put off by what you're seeing on the Eventbrite page. If you want to come in, you haven't got the money, you can come in for nothing. If you want to offer some donations, then you can make a donation. I don't know if this is going to have the same energy as the conference. It was called London Schools and the Black Child Conference. That's what it was called. It used to take place in the Queen Elizabeth Conference Centre in Westminster. This one is, like I said, it sounds like it's got a slightly different flavour. But if you're interested, that's what's taking place. The next event, the next event is actually a play called The White Card, and this is actually been written by Claudia Rankine. I think she's an African American, and it's really about revealing the racist violence or the effect of the racist violence in in the footage that we see of police brutality and how it traumatized African children. She's taken a slightly different. That's a topic she's trying to address, but she's taking a different angle the way she's doing it. So she's using the play to look at the use of traumatic imagery by liberal racists. So she calls it liberal racism, but basically she's got a family of European art collectors, and this is really strange. She wants to see how even those who are perceived as our allies can be engaged in this liberal racism and have detrimental effects on in a play. It's an African artist without actually meaning to do so, and her play is set in the Trump era. So it should be an interesting story to see how this goes, but it's a very important point. There was a study in 2018, it's a US study, but it's found that the suicide rate amongst African children between the ages of 5 and 12 were twice that of their European peers. So this play is going to be taking place, I think it's Newcastle upon Tyne. I've forgotten the name of the theatre, so you can actually go there and catch it, but then it's going to go on a UK tour afterwards. So it's called The White Card. It's going to look at it from an artistic perspective, but it is dealing with the issue of traumatization that we face, by looking at all this racialized violence. And that's a really good point. We don't really talk about that, and I know I have friends, and the times I don't actually watch. Sometimes I only watch things if I'm going to comment on it, because that's just a perspective on it. But I tend to avoid watching as much violence that's perpetrated against African people as possible, until I'm ready. I tend not to sleep well after seeing this kind of stuff. It stays with me for days, if not weeks. Talking about staying with us for days, not weeks. The violence that took place in Buffalo the supermarket with a white supremacist teenager, there's a comment I saw which was a really good point. That stayed for a short period of time in the media news cycle than the slap of Will Smith to Chris Rock. And this is when we talk about liberal racism, this is what we're talking about. This is the point. So if you think about 10 African people living in America were murdered while going shopping, and one African man slapped another African man on a podium for insulting his wife, the murder of those innocent African people was pushed off the agenda far faster than that slap. What's going on? That's white supremacy. Even my favorite news channel, Channel 4, kind of gave up the ghost on that story. They've covered it bitty, but not to the degree of what it actually means and how we in the UK, we in the diaspora feel when we hear about our family facing that. Because there's a saying, whatever happens in America is only like 3 to 5 years away from coming to us in the UK, for example. So it's not only us just being traumatized about what's happened to our family in America, but it's also seeing that inspire similar actions where we live. So this play hopefully will help unpick some of those issues, those stories.
Sorry, just giving you a time check. It's 11 minutes past 8.
Thank you. 11 minutes past 8. We're going to wrap up in 4 minutes. So I'm going to do this really, really quick. Thank you for that, Sister Oleander. Much appreciated. So this is I don't know if you've not seen The Summer of Soul, even if you have seen the film Summer of Soul or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, if you are anywhere in East London or in London and you're nearby and you want to see in an open space how it should be, well, the amazing Bhavesh and Minority, Loud Minority are hosting another Tree Circle cinema, and this is going to take place in June. I can't remember the date. I think it's on that slide somewhere, but June the 4th. Yes, Saturday, June the 4th. I don't know if you've ever been to Tree Circle Cinema. They're amazing events. We just sit on the floor. There's a circle of trees. Literally, the trees are planted in a circle. There's a big cinema. They're listening to music, dancing, and watching the film. This is an amazing film. Amazing. It's a fantastic film about that. It's about the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969. I've seen it already. I'm going to go and see it again. Hopefully I'm going to be free on that day. If you get a chance, check it out. It's the directorial debut of Amir Questlove Thompson. It features some of my most favorite artists, from Nina Simone, Sly and the Family Stone, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Abby Lincoln, and Max Roach. Actually, Abby Lincoln. She changed her name from Abby Lincoln. I've forgotten what she changed it to now. Sorry, Abby Lincoln and Max Roach, Stevie Wonder, Mahalia Jackson, David Ruffin, The Fifth Dimension. It's just an amazing film, and it's very uplifting. It's very educational as well. So if you are in East London, or if you're in London and you just want to kind of like chill and just go somewhere, it's free. You just sit down in the park and just listen to some beautiful music. Okay, let me wrap up really quickly. This one is Nelson from Simpsons. I think the person who stole and we assume destroyed the blue plaque for David Oduwole has been caught. I'm not sure. I think 2 people have been arrested, but I couldn't find a story in time on the arrests. But what we do know is that there have been hundreds of images of our brother David Oduwole displayed across the city in defiance of racists, and it's just been a beautiful story to cover. And I wish I was there to see that, and I wish that could happen and extend to outside Leeds into London. For those of you who don't know, we've covered this story a few times. David Oduwole was hounded to death by 2 policemen in Leeds in the early hours of April 1969. He was homeless, he had mental health issues, and the police were just straight out racist. It's one of the first prosecutions of a police officer and I will just say for murdering an African, but they escaped murder, but they were prosecuted, and they guilty of, I can't remember what the exact charges were. So this is great, and I put this inside this section because you can see that like it's been on these digital billboards. We've had the council paying for it, we've had some advertising companies paying for it. This is the plaque on a theatre house in Leeds. So even though they took down the plaque, the members plaque, it's still there, and we're still remembering, and we're talking about him even more, even now, even today. It's a great people power. Okay, really quick one. Those of you who are engaged in the ACT meetings, that's the name of the group now. We're called ACT, the African Community Task Force. We're having our meeting, our fortnightly meeting, Rechild Q and Safeguarding Issues, tomorrow, 23rd of May, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's going to be at the IPAD Centre. You have to register if you're going to come, and if you can't make it but you want to participate and help out, you can find the registration link on my I think it's on my Facebook page and my Twitter page. So you need to register before you can engage, but yeah, it's worthwhile, and you know, we are moving forward. You know, this might not be on the radar people right now, but we are still keeping our eyes on this, and we're still working. Okay, my favorite part of the program. I hate that I have to rush this in the next 4 minutes. Yes, I just did add another minute to the timeline. So in the next 4 minutes, community champions. Okay, so let's start off with one that put a smile on my face. This is the Full Circle Everest expedition. And they're an all-African climbing team, and they actually made history by scaling Mount Everest. Now, it's not a first black story. I've got to be clear about that one. There have been other Africans who have made it to the top of Mount Everest, but this is the first time that this team has done it as an all-African team. And so 7 members made it, and they're hoping to inspire the next generation of outdoor enthusiasts. And I think that's just amazing. I think that, you know, I'm an avid walker, avid cyclist. And I hate the fact that, you know, we are often perceived as bound to concrete, bound to urban spaces. When, you know, we love nature. You know, many of us love to actually engage in outside life. I'm not going to pretend that I am a mountaineer. I'm not going to pretend I'm a skier. And I have some friends who tell me about the amazing holidays they have skiing. And so they have these African ski clubs where they go together and they have these amazing holidays. But it's important to break the stereotypes of what we can do and what we can't do. And just for the record, the number of African people reaching the world's highest peak, that's Mount Everest, has now gone up from 10 to 17. So that's good. The downside is that's out of 10,000 people in total. So that's why I felt that these are community champions, because there's 10,000 people who made the pick. Only 17 of us have done it. So if we decide we want to do it, just go out and do it. There's nothing that we can't achieve. I want to big them all up. The next community champion, and this one received one of those Google pages, you know, what they call them, Google Doodles. It's a lovely remembrance of, I say remembrance, he's still with us, of Masisi Kunui's, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly, his 92nd birthday. That was on May the 12th. And he's an anti-apartheid activist and a South African poets laureate. He was awarded by UNESCO, and his work records the history of the Zulu people. Now, our elder used his work to resist apartheid, and I say this, you know, and I don't mean just in a kind of like, you know, apartheid is bad kind of way. It is in such a way, such a powerful way. And it moves so many people that it was actually banned in Azania. And he's published some great literature such as The Ancestors in the Sacred Mountain, which explores South African culture, religion, and history in the context of colonialism, apartheid, and African enslavement. So this is, you know, he's really used his craft of African literature. He is an African literature professor, by the way, at the University of California in Los Angeles, but he's really used his craft to uplift and to record and encode and to archive our history. So yeah, another great community champion. The next story is really, there's so many champions in this particular story. I don't know where to start. If you get a chance, please go to the BBC website, and there's a story about a freedom school in Kenya, which is actually teaching students to love their African culture. And it's an amazing story. It's like 3 or 4 minutes long. And you see the parents, you see the students, you see the teachers, and it's an Afrocentric school. It's called the Freedom School. And they challenge this whole idea. I mean, many of us will know that education across Africa in many places is still based on colonial curriculums. You know, there have been tweaks, but essentially it's using a colonial framework. So having the Freedom School in Kenya use an Afrocentric approach, which not only they promote, but also that the parents and students embrace, is something that we should just be championing everywhere and just jumping up for joy. This is an amazing initiative, and I want to give thanks for that. And that includes using mother tongue language. So it's a really good initiative. It was founded by the engineer Oku Kanayo Egbeni and Dr. Uferi Kanayo. So give thanks for that. And another community champion. It's a great story. Watch the video. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely little clip. Last couple of community champions. It's good to have so many this week. These three sisters, I say sisters, they're not blood sisters. Well, two of them maybe. Portia Robinson, Alana Ashilo, and Shakira Ashilo. They're opening a home for young girls in care. And this story really, I thought it was worth sharing because they do something that I really like. They make a distinction between providing a house for children in care and a home. And it's really important because their project, which is really looking to provide a home for young girls who have faced sex trafficking and gangs and all this kind of like the trauma that comes with that, have kind of said that they need to be culturally competent. They need to make sure that they're Afrocentric, that they provide for the cultural needs of these girls so they feel like where they are is safe, that they feel that where they are is a home and not just a house where they're dwelling. So this is a really good story. Again, you know, let's keep our eyes out on this. And the reason why, you know, I think again it's something that we should see as an exemplar for community championship is because it reminds us, and it can remind us, that we can innovate. Even though we're in a space where we're facing Afrophobia every day, we're facing institutional racism every day, all these systems are in place and they seem entrenched, that as long as we are imaginative, as long as we have ideas about what we can do to make things better, as long as we continue to think in that way and we can start to create projects that cater for us unapologetically, then we can always progress, we can always make a change. And what we do is that we manufacture hope. And it's with hope that we have change. So that's, you know, kind of like Portia Robinson, Alana Ashil, and Shakira. And I think the last, is this the last one? No, I think there's two more. Sorry, this is the penultimate one. This one, again, if you get a chance, please go on the BBC website and just listen to our princess speaking about this. She is an 8-year-old mathematician from Deptford, East London, and she's been crowned the top mathlete. It's amazing. She basically took part in a World Maths Day Global Challenge. It's a worldwide competition involving around 10 million young people from around 160 countries. Now, she attends, Girling Gibbons Primary School, and she is the only girl to have won gold in the 10 categories this year. So she won 10 categories. So, you know, 8 years old, amazing math. She wants to, I think she said she wants to be was it an engineer or a scientist? I think she wanted to be. Watch the video. It's like 2 minutes long. It's just amazing. Definitely a community champion. I just want to big her up.
Sorry, Toyin, just so that we don't upset the Deptford residents, it's South East London, not East London.
Sorry,
we don't want to upset our South East London colleagues and cousins and family.
Thank you. Yes, I have a habit of claiming everything for East London and Hackney. My apologies. Deptford in South East London. That was a typo on my behalf. It doesn't take away from, thank you, Sister Oleander. It doesn't take away from the brilliance of our 8-year-old princess. And the last story, again, it's related to education, and this is, you know, I think you're going to like this one. This is the amazing story of Auntie Lawrence. Her name is Florence Zengeni, and she graduated with a master's at the age of 79. Now, why I love this story and why it's so uplifting is that she was told when she wanted to start and embark on this that she was too old to have a student loan. And, the system did everything to put her off, but she was determined. She was like, I want to learn. I mean, she's doing a master's was in business studies. And so, you know what she did? She saved up her weekly allowance. The whole, I think it was like £19,000 was the cost of her course. She saved up her weekly allowance, paid it off bit by bit. in order to graduate with this master's. And she has had a long, amazing life. She's been engaged in protests. She's been worked as a nurse. I mean, an international life, from, you know, traveling across. And she's worked in a nurse protesting against racism inside a hospital, which is the image you see over there. But now she's a grandmother or great grandmother. She's an elder. She just passed her master's. I'd love to be there for her graduation. And she just says that she's doing it and she hopes to inspire her whole family, and wants to start a charity to help those in poverty. That's what she's doing it for. It's business studies. She wants to start a charity. So she felt she needed to know how to do it. You know, if you read the story, you'll see that I think it's her daughter or her granddaughter. I can't remember which one it was, but one of them has said that actually now that you know, Auntie Florence has done this, I'm now rethinking about doing my PhD. I wasn't going to do it, but now I'm thinking, you know what, we can do this, and I'm going to do my PhD. And so I just think this is an amazing story. You're never too old, never. You know, if you put your mind to something, you can do it. It's a disgrace. I can tell you some of the problems that's going on with the education system, with the loans. The interest rate for student loans has gone up to, I think it's 19%. So like essentially what happens now is that if you are not on the higher paying threshold of, you know, you're paying back more interest than you're paying off the loan. It's outrageous what this government is doing. Outrageous. And it's penalizing young people. It's penalizing students for just wanting to get an education so they can actually empower themselves. But let's close on this positive note, this positive story of Auntie Florence Zengani. Thank you for that one. It's an amazing story that was shared with us by one of our contributors. And that's it really for tonight. I want to say thank you, of course, to our amazing brother Colin and our other researchers who kind of like share stories throughout the weeks, which I collate and put together to you. Our Queen, Sister Oleander, for being on the hotline. I know we had some technical issues earlier today when we were setting up. Apologies for the first few minutes, no audio. What else? And of course, to those of you out there listening and supporting, you know, those of you who are still continuing to make donations, I can't thank you enough. I know I haven't been putting out newsletters. I'm hoping that these broadcasts make up for the lack of newsletters, covering as much as the detail that we did in there here. I know I'm not the greatest of hosts, but we're trying. I want to thank you, our community, because, you know, you can see that we're still fighting. We're still doing our work. We still haven't given up hope. We haven't still given up the fight. I use the two images here. You know, my spiritual mentor, Amawale Malcolm X. There, it was his anniversary of his birthday. Was it birthday or passing? In the last couple of weeks, and my academic mentor, the late Abiola Ogunshon, who introduced me to the world of Educon, which is education and community development, which I am eternally grateful for. So, I mean, I think that's it. And with that,
and Martin Luther King.
Oh, of Brother Martin Luther King. He wasn't one of my role models, but I include him because he was an essential component for our fight for justice. The problem with me talking about Martin Luther King is that then I want to talk about Claudette Colvin. I want to talk about Rosa Parks. I want to talk about students in SNCC and all the many other African Americans who engaged in the civil rights movement. And they sometimes are always rendered as only being Martin Luther King. The women are often written out of that story, and that kind of often annoys me, you know, from Shirley Chisholm. I mean, it just goes on. But yes, you know, we can't forget Brother Martin Luther King. His one of his granddaughters right now is on Twitter, and she often shares some of the most amazing, empowering tweets and insights at the darkest times in American history. So his legacy is still being carried brightly.
Yes.
But yeah.
And Linda says thank you.
Oh, thank you. You know, thank you for staying with us. I know it's we went a little bit over the hour, and so thank you for staying with us and putting up with our technical gremlins. And I think one thing I should say, I think that and I'm a bit sad about this one, but I think from after next week will be the last program until September. I'm going to take a break.
Sorry, you mean the next fortnight, not next week?
Yeah, not next week, next fortnight. So the next program, which is in a fortnight's time, will be the last one for until September. Oh wow, I said that, and the feds are coming to kind of raid us. So, but we will be back. Don't worry, we will be back. I just need to take a little break. And the break for me isn't what you think. I don't get a break, but please join us in a fortnight's time. And until then, please stay safe, be good, be kind, and as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.